the mic level raised a little bit, but it's almost 10 after 3, so I wanted to get us underway. I'm Pete Altman. I'm the founder of don'twiden270.org. Thank you all for coming out today. You can't hear me in the back? We'll try a different mic. Oh, great. All right. How's this? Is this loud enough in the back? Oh, good. Perfect. So thank you all for coming out today. We're here to talk about highways, but I want to start with a different kind of travel through time. In the 1980s, I-270 had earned a reputation as one of the region's most congested highways. To solve this problem, Robert McGarry, the Montgomery County Transportation Director, fought a battle to widen I-270 to 12 lanes. He mocked other county leaders who opposed this widening, but he still won. And when the new lanes opened to traffic in October 1990, the Washington Post reported that, quote, I-270 should be able to handle the growth in traffic through the year 2010, end quote, and noted that it would keep pace with county growth plans. They even called it the superhighway of the future. Now, not far into that future, the Post checked in on that superhighway. A 1999 story found that now, less than 8 years after the project was finished, the highway has again been reduced to what one official called a rolling parking lot. The Post noted that traffic on some segments already had exceeded the levels projected for 2010. We had 5 years of smooth sailing, one person commented in the story. So, wow. In 1990, widening advocates said, this will clear up congestion for 20 years, but the benefit really only lasted for 5 years. And before even a decade had gone by, traffic was as bad or worse than before. So what did Robert McGarry, the person who fought to widen the road, have to say about it? I personally thought it would last much longer than this. I just didn't, in my wildest dreams, think it would fill up that fast. So what happened? Well, the problem is traffic fills empty space. It's called induced demand, and it's been documented all over the country and all over the world. That's why the 1999 Washington Post story was called Maryland's Lesson, Widen the Roads, Drivers Will Come. So let's come back to the present. The problem is Governor Hogan and Maryland's Secretary of Transportation, Pete Ron, aren't doing their homework and aren't interested in the lessons of history, which means our lives are at stake, not in the most extreme sense, but everything wrapped up in our lives is now uncertain. Our homes, our neighborhoods, our communities, our friends, our quality of life, our futures, our financial security, our sense of security in general, it's all at risk because they want to widen I-270 and 495. So we're here today to talk about how to avoid repeating mistakes, how to restore our sense of certainty and security in our homes, neighborhoods, and lives, and how to make sure, at the very least, that whatever they do to I-270 and 495, the roads stay inside their existing footprints. Let's take a moment to recognize and thank the elected officials who are joining us today. Mark Barbe. County Executive Mark Elrich. County Council Member for District 17, Sidney Katz.
It's confusing, but it's District 3.
Clearly I have 17 on.
I memorized.
I'm glad somebody did. County Council Member at Large, Gabe Albernoz. County Council Member Hans Reimer. Is Hans here? Not here yet. Rockville City Council Members Mark Pershala. Rockville City Council Member Virginia Ullman. Mayor Newton and Councilmember Feinberg, Montgomery County Councilmember Glass, Delegates Polakovich, Carr, and Gilchrist sent their regrets that they're unable to make it today. We may also be joined by Gaithersburg Councilmember Lori Ann Sales, who has a meeting in the district at this time, but she may get here before we wrap up. I also want to thank the many volunteers who are helping us today and who have been knocking on doors, talking to neighbors, gathering petitions, putting out door hangers, helping with our communications, and lobbying in Annapolis. Linda Rosendorf, Janet Gallant. There's a few on this list, so let's hold applause till the end. Andy Gallant, Sally Stoles, Richard Stoles, Linda Dominic, Michael Stolar, Debbie Koss, Kim Pins, Becky Batt, Bill Hunt. Thank you all for the tremendous work that you've been putting in. I really appreciate it. I also want to recognize Ben Ross with the Maryland Transit Opportunities Coalition. Brad German and Dave Hondowitz, if Dave is here yet, well, we'll recognize him when he gets here. With Citizens Against Beltway Expansion. They have been all very welcoming to our new group and have generously shared their experience and expertise with us. We know many people who wanted to, but couldn't be here today, so we are live streaming this meeting on Facebook. Okay. It is starting to feel like we're going to a lot of meetings about the highways these days. For many, it started with the Maryland Department of Transportation, or MDOT, started its show and tell workshops about the project. MDOT gathered over 2,200 public comments over the course of last summer and fall, and just last month, quietly, published a compendium and summary of them. So what did they hear from us? The most common written comment was to keep any changes within the existing footprint of the highways only. Over 1,100 people made that point, a lot of them homeowners whose backyards end at the sound wall. Zena, your home is right up against the highway. Would you mind sharing with us what your concerns are?
Yes.
My name is Zina Youssef. I live in.
Hear it louder.
My name is Zina Youssef. I live in the Rockshire area, specifically in Chantilly Court. And my husband and I own a townhouse that is less than 100 feet away from the barrier wall. So even adding one lane, I would lose my backyard, or probably the wall will be the back screen door right there, which will be a really nice view. Anybody who is a painter is very welcome to come and decorate. This has been really frustrating for my husband and I. We are concerned about the value of our home. We had spent a lot of money fixing our townhouse and making it the way we want to. We've been living in our townhouse for 12 years and look forward to stay in our townhouse for many more years to come. We love the area, we love the community, we grew roots in the community. Honestly, I don't want to move. I don't want to move, and I don't want to be forced to move, and I don't want anybody to make the decision to dictate my life for me. It's enough dealing with the stress of life. I'm sure we all have, yet this project comes to basically just destroy my entire life. My concern is not just the widening of 270, it's enough the sound and the pollution and the dust. We have to clean our duct every 5 or 6 years now, and because we're close to the highway. I mean, there's no way. The other thing is, I am concerned about getting a mortgage. with the interest rate nowadays, would I be able to find a place, a townhouse or a house in this area, and the prices are just crazy, it's skyrocketing. I don't want to move, so it's not to my interest. And if this project take effect, how would it be? How would we get compensated? I mean, obviously the prices will drop down because the value, no one wants to buy in this area. So how is it going to be? That's another concern for me. So it's financially, emotionally, and it's all over. It's stressful every day. I mean, thanks to Pete, I read his emails every day, but I am not comfortable. I'm not happy, and I'm very disturbed. And everything, I'll vote, I'll do whatever against this insane project. I'm sorry, but I'm really not happy. Mass transit is the answer. It's not widening to 70, because I guarantee you, just like Pete said, in a number of years, we will be back again discussing the same thing, widening to 70. For how long? Thank you for your time, and I'm sorry, I'm emotional. Thank you.
The next top concern, and thank you, Zia. The next top concern that had over 1,000 mentions, MDOT simply labeled as property without any explanation. Now, obviously, a lot of us are worried about impacts to our property, but I also saw in the comments a lot of concerns about property values. Linda, that's one of your and Joe's concerns, right? Would you mind coming up, and on your way up, you'll have to be very close to the microphone and speak loudly at the same time.
All right.
And then just tell us who you are and your neighborhood.
Okay. Is that close enough? All right. My name's Linda Dominic, and my husband Joe and I live in Rosehill Falls. For those who aren't familiar with that neighborhood, it's exit 5 off of 270. It's basically the neighborhood that wraps around Julius West Middle School. We've lived there for 22 years. We love the neighborhood. And like many people, and like Zina said, you live in a neighborhood for a long time, you invest a lot of time and money in your property, and we are extremely concerned, as are many of our neighbors, about the impact of this project on our property values. It's one thing for the state to take someone's house and knock it down to widen the highway to reduce highway congestion. It's another thing entirely if they just bring the road closer to you and rip up the neighborhood in the process. We're very concerned that the integrity of our neighborhoods are at risk here by any activity that's going to destroy green space and bring the road into the neighborhoods farther than it already is. So we very much urge support of House Bill 102, for counties to have the approval process for these kinds of projects. Annapolis is a long way away from here, and the people, the project planners and the politicians in Annapolis don't care about our neighborhoods as much as, obviously, those of us who live here, and we are looking to our elected representatives to protect us from a project that is potentially so destructive to our areas.
Thank you, Linda. Business owners have also been speaking up, urging that MDOT choose options that would be good for employers and the community. Jason, you have a company that I think some people will be familiar with that's right by the highway. Where are you? Over there. Why don't you come up and tell us what your concerns are as a business owner?
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Jason Mandler, the owner of Carmen's Italian Ice. I kind of live in the neighborhood because I'm at the shop, quite a bit. So, being there for 18 years, we're kind of the eyes and ears for the neighborhood, and a lot of people come in and always ask what's going on in the neighborhood. most of the time I have an answer, or I know who they can talk to, or I've heard something. Unfortunately, I know not very much. There's just so much uncertainty, and I think that's really cause for concern. It's just, we don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen with our business. I mean, I've invested 18 years so far in building that business. I can't imagine right now relocating that. We're right there by the retaining wall. Our landlord lives in Florida. I'm not necessarily certain he's not here today fighting the battle. I know he's in the loop on everything, but like some previous people have said, it's different if you live here, whether you're in Florida or Annapolis. You know, this is our home, this is our livelihood, and there's just a lot of uncertainty. And we like our little community. There's not many neighborhoods like that. It attracts people. It's awesome when a realtor will come by and they'll show a house and they'll say, "Oh, is that next to Woodley Gardens, or is that next to Carmen's?" And there's some appeal to that. The kids can walk down. It's a neighborhood place, and again, there's not a lot of neighborhoods like that.
It's worth noting that people didn't just tell MDOT what they didn't want, they said what they do want. And the theme that got the next highest amount of support overall was transit, with 841 mentions. And that emphasis on transit was repeated when asked for reactions to the 15 alternatives that MDOT put forward. The top 5 preferences from the public were for technological solutions to better manage traffic, heavy rail like Metro, making no change at all, light rail like the Purple Line, and contraflow, which is a form of reversible lane. Yet, just days after posting this summary of public preferences, MDOT announced it had decided to drop the most preferred options from consideration and instead focus only on different ways of adding lanes. There are now 6 options that MDOT is going to continue considering. 4 of them would add lanes to 270, and all of them would add lanes to 495. This disregard for public opinion seems to be a pattern. In September 2018, Governor Hogan promised that not a single home is gonna be taken, as he emphatically told me at the Gaithersburg Labor Day Parade. And he repeated that promise to news outlets the next day. But he refused the follow-up requests, including from Rockville's mayor and council, to make that a binding commitment. Secretary Ron repeated this promise during the roadshow briefing in Rockville last October, and in response to being pressed on this point, stated definitively that no homes would be taken. And yet, when he gave testimony before Chairman Barbay's committee this January, Secretary Ron was not so definitive. In fact, he said his agency would instruct contractors not to go beyond the right-of-way or take homes unless absolutely, positively necessary. Translation, we will knock down homes if necessary. So neither the process nor the promises are reassuring. And as a result, here's where we find ourselves. We don't know what MDOT is going to do. We don't know if the state will add no lanes, 2 lanes, or 4 lanes to 270, or how many they'll add to 495. We don't know how it'll affect our homes and our neighborhoods. We don't know how it will affect property values or our futures. But we do know that the governor and MDOT are not willing to commit that no homes will be taken. And we do know that we cannot rely on verbal promises from the governor or Secretary Ron. We do know the state is disregarding public input. And we know that MDOT is ignoring the fact that widening doesn't work as a long-term congestion solution. And we know that this uncertainty is creating terrible anxiety for people. So, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to just let this happen?
No.
Are we going to let our homes be put at risk?
No.
Are we going to let our neighborhoods be threatened?
No.
Are we going to go down without a fight?
No.
No. not without doing everything we can and everything we have to make this right. So we are turning to you, our elected representatives. We need all of your support and all of you working together to make certain these roads don't go beyond their current footprints. Let's start with the state legislature, since that's the body that has authority to set and change the rules by which MDOT implements these projects. Several bills have been filed that relate to the highway project, and these are the ones that give us the best chance of protecting ourselves. There's HB 102, the county consent bill. It would require the state to get approval from a majority of the counties affected before it can build toll roads, highways, or bridges through them. So if passed, MDOT would have to get Montgomery County's support for any toll lane plan to be added to 270 and 495. House Bill 663 would essentially put into legislation the governor's promises that no homes, property would be taken in order to move this project forward. HB 91 would require MDOT to complete an environmental review before getting approval to solicit bids on the project from private contractors. Basically means you cannot just rush this project through before we actually know what it is. Now, all three of those bills are awaiting votes to move out of Chairman Barbay's committee. Now, we did get some late breaking news yesterday. The House Appropriations Committee just amended MDOT's budget to hold up some of its funds, a small amount, but a symbolic amount, until it stops trying to rush hiring contractors and completes the environmental impact statement. So with that, I want to invite Delegate Barvey to come to the microphone first. And since we have limited time, you'll love this, and we've got elected officials, we're going to use a timer system, just like when we go to speak at their events. Very generous. Our guests will have up to 5 minutes to address the group, and then we'll turn to the audience for questions. Questions will be limited to 1 minute. And you will have 2 minutes to answer. Sure. I do reserve the right of discretion regarding enforcement of these rules.
Whoa.
We will then repeat this process for other elected officials in turn.
Hey, thanks. It's great being here.
Oops.
I know. There we go. First of all, good afternoon. I think I do have some good news for you, you just heard it. There are. My name is Kumar Barvey, and let me just say hello from Senator Cheryl Kagan and Delegates Gilchrist and Delegate Julie Plakovich-Carr, Jim, and the three of them are in Annapolis right now fighting for bond bills and money for District 17, and that's why they're not here. So let me just begin by reiterating the fact that we in the District 17 team are firmly opposed to widening the footprint of I-270 and the Beltway. And in my case, and I think I speak for the other three as well, I'd be perfectly fine with counterflow opposable lanes, and I'd be fine with tolling that if it paid only for the cost of that conversion. But we are all opposed to widening I-270. Now, there are 6 bills in my committee that I could roll out inside of 24 hours, but we have no assurance. In fact, we've been told that those bills won't pass the Senate. So, the workaround is budget language that you were just told about. Now, let me just explain. I generally don't like to go into the weeds of legislative tactical details, but I know from having knocked on your doors that you're up to the task of understanding all the strategery. So let me just explain why we've decided to go the budget route and why I opted and asked for the budgetary language. Bills don't have to pass in the Maryland General Assembly except for the budget. We can't leave Annapolis without a budget. Also, the budget is the only bill, to my knowledge, that the governor cannot veto. When we produce a budget, oh my, when we produce a budget, it's the budget and it's over with. The governor can't veto it. So what the budget language does is it basically inserts the language from House Bill 91, and that basically says that we can't rush the project, a public-private partnership project, before getting a full environmental impact statement as required by the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act process. So what does that mean? That means that the budget we're working on goes from July 1 of 2019, showing my age here, July 1, 2019 to June 30th, 2020. So at least through that period of time, there won't be a construction on I-270 or the Beltway. So this basically freezes up the project for that length of time. Budgets are one-year documents, so we would have to either pass one of these bills or we would have to do it again in the next budgetary cycle. And so now we're going into a negotiation with our counterparts in the Senate, and it's our hope and it's our expectation that that language will be adopted in the budget. And as I said, the governor can't veto a budget. So the minute the budget's passed, the problem has been solved through June 30th of 2020. Now, as to the overall issue of P3, the P3 law, we are going to work collaboratively with our colleagues in the Senate to relook at the law over the interim meaning the time between legislative sessions. So we will adjourn, I think, on April 9th, and then for 9 months we will be in that interim period. And knowing that nothing's going to happen between now and June of 2020, we now have the ability to really pull together all the votes we need. We have them in the House, we don't necessarily have them in the Senate, and we'll be able to do that and hopefully pull together a veto-proof majority, because that's what we would have to do. We would have to actually have margins that were capable of overturning a gubernatorial veto. So that's what I've been doing for the last couple of weeks. It's good news. I think we can breathe a sigh of relief at least until June 30th of 2020. And in that meantime, I'm pretty sure we can pull together veto-proof majorities to get it all done. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you, Delegate. Would you mind just clarifying again the budget amendment that's just been passed? Does it completely stops MDOT from developing its plans?
Well, let me explain how this public-private partnership law works. It's designed to have the planning and the bids and the environmental impact statement occur simultaneously. By requiring that the environmental impact statement occur first, it really, well, number one, it gives us assurance that the environment is not being, that the environmental impact is a positive one, or at least not a negative one. But most importantly, it really forces the administration to almost set in concrete what their plans are before they go forward with them. If we do a P3 the way the law currently says, contracts could be let the next several months when the legislature is not in town. With this budgetary language, let me just explain, the budget is more than just a list of numbers on a page of how much money we're going to spend. The budget also directs the administration on under what circumstances and conditions money can be spent. By saying that there has to be an environmental impact study prior to the release of a, let me get the precise terminology. It basically prohibits the Department of Transportation from submitting a pre-solicitation report for a public-private partnership, and requires that an environmental impact statement until an environmental impact statement is available. So basically, the process as it is right now has the cart before the horse. We're putting the horse in front of the cart, and we're making sure that that is the budgetary law at least until June 30th of 2020.
Okay, so because I'm trying to follow along, and I'm sure others in the room are, and just to make sure we have everything straight. Right. So, with that step, with that budget amendment for in the House,
right.
That's
going to go straight into negotiations with the Senate. And what typically happens is, if you remember from civics, when you learn this, if the House bill and the Senate bill are different, the House and Senate appoint conferees, equal numbers of House members and senators, and they sit around the table and they negotiate. And we're going to be negotiating very hard with our Senate counterparts because this is something that Speaker Bush feels very strongly about.
So that creates a delay, essentially.
That's right. And that gives us the breathing space we will have, that we will need to put together a permanent, a permanent solution legislatively. And again, I have to emphasize, it's 71 votes in the House and 24 in the Senate aren't good enough. We need to have supermajorities to override a gubernatorial veto, and that's going to take a little bit of time, more time than we have between now and April 9th of this year.
So the idea is you basically, by a year of delay, the MDOT can't move forward, and that gives you time to craft
Correct.
a more holistic solution to the law that authorizes them doing these kinds of projects.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So that they can't just railroad over us.
That's right.
Okay. Now, what of the negotiations? So that sounds promising, but then it sounds like for us in this room, it's, I guess, the equivalent of a lifeline, but we're not quite into the lifeboat yet because.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like what I like to. It's sort of it's one of the most important political scientists ever, Mick Jagger, said you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you might find you get what you need. And what we need is to put this off until June 30th of 2020.
Now, the first version of that line is, but you might get legislation.
I don't remember it that way. But.
And so, is it fair to infer from this legislative approach that conversations with MDOT have not been productive in terms of getting them to change their fundamental attitude?
Yeah, I mean, what we were doing is we were holding these bills in my committee and negotiating with the administration, but when word started to get out that the bills probably wouldn't fare that well in the Senate, I decided along with Mark Corman, and Mark Corman is the chairman of the Montgomery County House delegation, and we basically went to the Speaker and Maggie McIntosh, who's the chair of the Appropriations Committee, and said we'd like to go forward with budgetary language because, again, this way we don't have to worry about a gubernatorial veto, and this way because Speaker Mike Bush feels very strongly about this, and I'll tell you, Speaker Mike Bush agrees with all of us in this room. He really doesn't want I-270 to be widened. That's the sense I get from the Speaker, and so that's going to be our negotiating stance with the Senate. And I think that all the Montgomery County senators, Cheryl Kagan included, support that stance, and so I feel pretty confident that that's what will happen in the budget.
Okay. I just want to make sure, because that was a lot of not the Hill, but Annapolis, right?
Yeah,
everybody following along.
So basically, just to summarize all of this, we want to buy ourselves enough time to put together a veto-proof majority in both we have it already in the House. We don't necessarily have it in the Senate, by my count at least. And in the meantime, using the budget as a mechanism is good because it's a bill that the governor can't veto.
Actually, hang on. We have microphones so everybody can hear the questions.
I had nothing to do with that.
The key is to avoid pointing them in the direction of the speaker. Don't point them to the speaker.
I got it.
And that might be a very sensitive one, I'm going to guess. Yeah. All right, we're going to use this mic instead. Let's just put the wireless ones away.
Thank you, Delegate. Two quick questions. One, why isn't there more support in the Senate? And then two, is it true that counties on the Eastern Shore kind of have legislative veto power on projects? And if that's the case, why doesn't Montgomery County already have it?
Okay, the first one, I don't know what, I've been talking to my counterparts in the Senate, and that's the word we've gotten back from the Senate. I don't know what the hang-up is there, and frankly, I would rather spend the next 9 months talking to 47 senators and lining up votes. So I see this as the safest thing. Yes, the Eastern Shore does have the ability, the Eastern Shore counties wrote a law several decades ago which basically allows them to veto any toll road or bridge that affects their county. Actually, the way it's written is to say that a majority of the counties that are affected, if they oppose that kind of a project, it can't go forward. Typically, that is going to be only one county, because take the Bay Bridge, it goes from Anne Arundel County to, I believe, Kent County, and Kent County would just, throw up its hand and say, no, we don't want another span or another lane or whatever, that they could do that. I'll tell you, it is not, that law is seen as a very bad precedent by practically everybody in Annapolis, because giving local jurisdictions the ability to veto a project, I mean, imagine if Georges County didn't want the purple line, for example. I mean, that's just a bad concept in terms of legislation. Now, there are a bunch of other 6 or 7 bills that have to do with, I don't know where, there he is. There are 6 or 7 bills in my committee that have to do with public-private partnerships, and one that Jared Solomon from Montgomery County offered is really, I think, a very perceptive analysis and inspection of what the P3 process ought to be, not globally within the state of Maryland, statewide. And I really like his bill, and I would love to have an opportunity to see if we could get that passed, because that would give a lot of the elements that the other bill that your House Bill 102 has. Functionally, a lot of those elements would be in that, and it would make the P3 process more collaborative, which is what it was always intended to be to begin with.
Back far left, you'll have to come up to the mic if you don't mind.
Or I can repeat your question.
Or,
Umar, Larry LeClaire.
Oh, Larry, hey.
Quick question. I know there are several P3 statutes on the books in Maryland. Now, using the budgetary maneuver that you're going to use, what are the chances, perhaps, of next session using that particular language and inserting that language into the existing statutes already on the book?
Okay, so the question was, the language that we've inserted into the budget I think it was last night, what are the chances of putting that into law and making it a permanent law? And I guess whether we decide to go that way or in some other, use some other mechanism, I think the chances are pretty good when you have 9 months to line up the votes.
Just to clarify what I thought I understood, so this budgetary move to have an environmental statement for the action.
It requires an environmental impact statement be completed and available before a pre-solicitation bid could be put out.
And does that guarantee the delay until 2020?
Yeah, I think so, because for this reason, the P3 mechanism, as they typically, the way they play out typically, is it's not a typical procurement procedure where you say you want to buy a fleet of vehicles and whoever is going to sell it to us for the cheapest is going to get the contract. These P3 arrangements tend to be much more collaborative. You have contractors negotiating back and forth with the administration. By putting the environmental impact statement at the very beginning of the process, a lot of that negotiation, I mean, let me just say this, the people who support additional lanes and widening of I-270 don't like this language. Let me just simplify it in that way. But I think it's important because we need to know what the environmental impact is before we start the negotiation, not concurrent with the negotiation.
So there's not a chance they'll say, here's the environmental impact in 6 months, and instead of getting the delay till 2020, that's not going to happen.
Oh, and nobody anticipates that happening. And by the way, let's just say for the sake of argument, I'm not saying that this is what's going to happen, but let's say for the sake of argument the legislature did nothing. Any deal would still have to be approved by the Board of Public Works, which is made up of the governor, who would vote in favor of it, Nancy Kopp, who was elected by the legislature and would be heavily, I happen to believe she'd vote against it, and then the third and swing vote would be Peter Francho, who's also elected by the public, and he's hearing from all of you just the way we are. And so, and he, unlike the governor, he's not term limited. So he's going to be running for office in another 3 years. The governor won't be.
Hi, I'm Elliot Levine. I live in the Old Farm community, and I could walk to the forest buffer Thank you for
Louder.
Louder.
Thank you for your comments. I had a question that I've wondered about ever since the beginning of this process. I reviewed the March 18, 15 proposals. I looked at all the criteria, and I was sort of incensed that within the environmental criteria, they never considered air pollution or emissions. They never considered the fact that there's a GHG law in Maryland that this would affect, if passed, would leave a smaller cap for industry, because transportation is the biggest emissions reducer. Without any of this analysis, in February, they whittled it down to 6 or 7 proposals, again, without ever considering emissions, which led them to eliminate all the mass transit considerations. How did they get this far? I mean, it really appeared to me as if it was a charade.
Well, I guess you can put that under the heading of elections matter and elections have consequences. I didn't vote for Larry Hogan for this very reason. Now, I think that what you have to understand is that, by the way, we do have legislation in the legislature in my committee to introduce a greenhouse gas component into transportation planning. I will say that the situation is a little muddied now that it looks like in 10 years, as many as 20% of the vehicles sold could be electric vehicles. In fact, I'm driving one right now, my wife's car. So, but I fundamentally agree with you. I think we need to have a law in the books, and we need to have a veto-proof majority to require greenhouse gas analysis to be made before any transportation project is considered.
Yeah, I'm even I pretty much have the same question. So it's HB 695. Just that you support that.
Is that the bill that's been introduced by Vaughn Stewart?
I guess it has.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's basically.
Yeah. I mean, if I thought we had the votes, veto-proof majorities in the Senate and in the House to pass it, I could roll it out of committee in 48 hours.
Okay, and just if you have anything else to say just about the principle that you should always look first at greenhouse gases as well as local pollution, long-term stormwater impact.
Sure. As you may know, I was the sponsor of the original Greenhouse Gas Reduction Act and the 2016 redo of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Act. I completely agree with you on that. And that, of course, that bill had to do with the entire economy globally. It didn't specifically mention transportation, but the thought was that when Governor O'Malley signed the bill in the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Act, the first one, the thought was that a future governor would automatically take that into account. And unfortunately, our governor does not have the same philosophy on that as you and I do.
Thank you. I see more hands, so we're going to move to more questions. I do want to ask something to clarify.
Sure.
We heard about a budget
speaking? Pete Altman, he founded Don't Widen 270.
That went through yesterday that withholds $300,000 in funds, so the Secretary's funds within the MDOT budget. Is that
the language really is the more important thing? I mean, budgetary language. Maybe I wasn't clear enough in explaining.
Yeah, if you determine why $300,000 is the leverage to stop.
Well, the thing is that the budget is literally a bill that lasts for exactly 1 year. And so we can tell the governor how to spend the money, even if it's only $1.95. We can tell him, it's a him right now, we can tell him what to do and what not to do. And that's really the key component. It isn't so much the money as it is the direction of how the money and what the policy ought to be. It's a little bit like throwing a law into the budget, but it only lasts a year.
Right, but if it's saying you cannot use this pot of money, they were trying to get a $90 million contract to get contractors to work on this. So what's not clear is how does the language around that 300,000 or the 300,000 create the delay that you're talking about?
Oh, well, by requiring an environmental impact study that we don't believe is going to be available until certainly the next legislative session. The other thing, and it's important for you to understand that the people who support widening, the people who support more lanes and widening of the roads don't like this language because it takes flexibility away from them to do what they want to do and for them to do what they want to do when we're not in town as a legislature. And so I think, you know, look, I get it that you're still nervous. I get it that you're still concerned. I would be too, and you're not wrong to be concerned. But trust me when I say this: the people who disagree with us don't like this language.
Okay, it's not just nervousness, but I think we want to make sure we understand how it works, and I apologize for the deep dive. We'll get
No, it's
but it is. So is the language explicit? It's just saying you cannot proceed until you've got the EIS.
Right. I'll get
irrespective of the amount of money that's.
I mean, the amount of money is important as well, but I mean, but for me, the language is the key thing.
Okay, so it's not
the direction of what you can and cannot do in the order in which you can or cannot do it. That for me is the key.
So it's not saying you cannot move this project forward because we're not going to give you this $300,000. It's saying you cannot move this project forward until the environmental impact statement is done.
Correct.
And that's why there's a delay.
Correct, and that's good for the life of the budget, which ends on June 30th of 2020.
Okay, thank you, and thank you all for humoring me on that. Okay,
As far as
and then I'm
whether
in the
he's
front,
supporting widening 270. He does not support it.
Just put them up and we'll get there.
Good.
I'm Lynn Marble. I live at Regent Square, and I'm just curious about the environmental impact study. Who has the authority over that? Who is doing that, and who?
It's a federal process that has to go through the Environmental Protection Agency, and I know what you're thinking. Donald Trump is president.
No.
But it's a federal process that's that's pretty transparent, and that's what it is. It's not a state process.
Okay, we're gonna go up to the front here.
I'm Peter Ross. I live in Woodley Garden. I have two questions, and if it's premature, then one is about the mass transit option. If you're not extending the footprint, where are you putting that mass transit? That's one. The second one is, when they were doing the ICC, all the years we were fighting over that, the mass transit, blah, blah, blah. It was the last 6 months of this 20-year process. They said, oh, by the way, it's going to be a toll road. And I'm wondering, you know, I was in Virginia a couple weeks ago. The toll lane's going fine. Everything else, not moving at all. And I'm really concerned about this idea that we're going to have a toll coming up 270 to Frederick and back, because you're going to create this two-tier system that's not going to work. We're going to be having this conversation.
Well, let me slightly disagree with you here. My view is that I'm fine with posable lanes, and I'm fine with tolling them as long as the number of free lanes that are in existence now continue to be in existence. So in other words, if there's a spot of I-270 that has 4 free lanes, I don't want one of those 4 free lanes to be converted to a tolled lane. I would rather go on the other side of I-270 and have an opposing lane that's tolled, but have the same lanes that are free right now continue to be free. As to where is transit going to go if you can't widen the footprint, transit can take 2 forms. Number one, and the most preferred, would be to have buses going up the HOV lanes, basically. In fact, that's the cheapest way. The other thing is there's a proposal by a group of business people, maybe county executives, you've seen the proposal, of actually building a monorail on the current right-of-way of I-270. I don't know if that's feasible, but it has the benefit of being an outside-of-the-box concept that doesn't involve building more lanes, and that kind of transit really would reduce congestion. So that's my short answer to your questions.
To the back.
Hi, this is a question based on ignorance. In budget,
Aren't they all?
in budget mechanisms, P3 mechanism of budgeting, how is it related to the state budget? Are they linked?
Oh, well, no, let me just explain that the budget document is a law that lasts for 1 year, as I said. And you can pretty much say in the budget how you want money to be spent and directed. Literally, that's what the budget is. And so the P3 law is separate from the budget. It's true, it's a law on the books, but when you spend money under the aegis of a P3 statute, it still has to go through the budget. So it's a little bit like you have a salary of X, $100,000 a year, or whatever it is, but every 2 weeks you have, or every month you have to do your budget for that month. And it's the same kind of thing. You've got the amount of money that you're, you've got the law, you've got the laws on the books that you have to implement, but then you have to tailor the budget to accommodate what your needs are. And so that's what the interface is between the law on the books and the budget. And by the way, Maryland is unusual among the 50 states. The governor actually writes the budget, and we in the legislature don't have the ability to add to it or to move money from one place to another place. We can only cut the budget. So the governor is in the driver's seat when the budget is written. He writes the budget, but the compensating thing is that when we cut the budget and when we add budget language, our law then, the budget, goes into effect without his signature. And isn't subject to a veto. In most states, the governor, I think, can veto the budget.
Kate, I saw your hand up a moment ago.
Yeah, I was just...
Hang on.
The EIS that they would have to do, is that going to be on all the 6 alternatives? I'm assuming
no, I believe what they would do is they would do it on the preferred alternative. So
about 6 of them.
Yeah, they have to. I believe they have to narrow it down to one final alternative before the EIS can be done, because it's just unwieldy to do 6 environmental impact statements. And I don't think, and more to the point, the law doesn't require that.
Back to the back.
The governor will be happy to see HB 102 die in committee. Why not pursue both avenues? Why not pursue the budgetary and the legislative? And
because we don't believe we have the votes to get it out of the Senate.
But why not pass it out of the House and the considerable community feeling that goes through all of Montgomery County and elsewhere?
Yeah,
let's see what we can do.
Montgomery County is only 17% of the legislature.
Right.
So my fear, in my experience in the legislature, you only pull the trigger when you know you're going to hit the target, because to have a bill fail in the opposing chamber can often set you back several years. That's unfortunately the way things psychologically work in the legislature. I would rather get the votes and know I'm going to pass a law through both chambers with veto-proof majorities before I move forward, because having a bill fail in the Senate will cause people to just say, that was, we're not going to do that. We've seen that movie before. Is the way they say it. It's psychology to a great extent.
Melissa, I hand over. Yours is up a while ago.
Hi, I'm Hannah Wald, and I live in Regent Square. And I actually wanted to ask about sort of a different avenue that you hadn't really discussed as much, which was talking to MDOT about a commitment to. Can I use a different microphone? Oh, this helps, I think, a little bit. Okay.
Why don't you just ask the question and I'll repeat it, or not.
Sorry. Okay, so
yeah.
The question was, I know you've been talking to MDOT about committing more firmly to not taking anybody's homes, and if you have been, has there been any progress on that at all?
Not really. That's why we're going through the budgetary round.
Okay, thank you.
I guess 2 questions, but also questions for the county executive and City of Rockville.
You're wrapping the wire around the chairs there if you walk in that direction. There we go.
One is for people concerned about the environmental impact statement. I would point out that the county and the city could do what happens many times, sue the state on the basis of, and individuals here could sue the state on the basis of an inadequate environmental impact statement. From what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, that certainly could tie this project up for years. It's not the most desirable way to do that, but that's certainly an option that...
I don't know that that would succeed given the way the P3 law is currently written. I'm not sure, but I don't think that would succeed. I don't know that for absolute certain. I'll look into it.
The other aspect is that I don't understand why this county and the city haven't used their planning staff to try to influence and integrate themselves into this whole planning process.
Well, they have tried. I mean, I can't speak for the county executive, but I believe he's reached out, and so has the city of Rockville. They've tried to work with the administration, but I don't think they can tell you better how successful they feel they've been in that. And believe me, I'm not criticizing either the county or the city. I believe they've done everything they can do, but really it really requires a legislative solution. As to the lawsuit thing, I'd probably have to look into that. I don't know definitively whether that would be likely to succeed given the law that we have right now in the books.
We'll ask our county and city guests to address that when it's their turn. We've got about 7 more minutes with Delegate Barbe. We're going to go back there and then over here. And did somebody else have a hand up over? Okay, here we are. We got you.
Given what we've heard, it sounds as if these workshops that MDOT is holding have ignored the responses from the people. So what suggestions would you have when we attend these workshops?
The question.
Totally ignored. How do we respond in some constructive way so that they hear that they're ignoring us?
Okay, I think everybody heard the question. Look, it's important to go to all these workshops. It's important to be loud. It's important to make sure that the controller of the state of Maryland, Peter Francho, knows the public in Montgomery County feels the way that we all feel about widening I-270 in the Beltway. As I said, ultimately, this is all going to end up in the Board of Public Works, where 2 votes, where there are 3 people voting. One person is definitely voting for a P3, and another person is most definitely voting against it. And Peter Francho could be the swing vote. I don't know, but that's quite a ways down the road. Let me just say that So it's important to be active. It's important to be noisy. Let me just say something, though. There is a real difference of worldview here between myself and the administration. Pete Ron, who's the Secretary of Transportation, on numerous occasions, maybe he said it when you were in my committee, I can't remember, but on numerous occasions he has said that 81% of the trips, commuting trips, happen in a car. And so in their philosophy, 81% of the effort should be toward road construction and intersection improvement and that sort of thing. I, like you, I happen to think that every bus and every metro train and every monorail or whatever that we have moving people is going to take many cars off the roads and fight congestion in a more ecologically sound and manage a really simple way. That's a difference in worldview.
Hi, Kumar, Pat Reaver. Hi. I'm just getting into this sort of late in the game. The P3 law, does that allow the governor to go ahead with any project as long as it's privately financed? Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, basically that's correct. Actually, the governor of the state of Maryland has an extraordinary amount of power when it comes to transportation generally. The governor and the secretary of the Department of Transportation have extraordinary power in the state of Maryland. And ordinarily, that hasn't been a problem. It hasn't been a problem under Martin O'Malley. you know, I know some people will disagree, but it wasn't so much a problem under Bob Ehrlich, and certainly not under Paris Glendening. Obviously, I've agreed and disagreed with all three of those, and Schaefer. Those are the four governors I've served under. I agreed and disagreed with all of them on certain transportation projects, but it was a very collaborative, interactive thing with them, not so much, in my opinion, with this governor.
Back to room.
Sorry, hello. My name is James Beeson. I work for Essex Bank here in Woodley Gardens. I don't understand the psychology of losing a vote. I'm a banker, not a politician. A lot of people don't think there's a lot of difference. We're equally popular.
I don't know.
We're all here in this room.
I seem to do well here.
I'm deeply loved as well. We were all here in the same room last year, and we asked the same question, and that was about accountability. No one is accountable for this. The governor doesn't have his name on it. The legislature doesn't. You know, we ask questions. How do you come to the decision? Who makes a decision? And it's not even the head of MDOT. It's someone below him. Nobody is politically accountable. Nobody has to give us an explanation. So my question is, what is wrong with having a vote?
And losing?
And losing, because no one here feels that, you know, they have anyone to talk to about this. When this abomination goes through, somebody should have their name on it. And if there are, you know, politicians in other counties, they need to have their name on it. Right now, nobody seems to be accountable for this. Even if we just ask, how do you make the decision? You know, what is the math going into how you decide what things are worth here? We have nothing.
Okay, well, I have to disagree with you. The budget of Maryland is the work product of the state legislature. All of us vote on it. No doubt there will be an amendment to remove this on the floor of the House. There will no doubt be an amendment offered by somebody to remove this language from the budget, and we will all vote on it, and it will be a recorded vote. And then ultimately we will all vote on the budget. And, you know, good or bad, I voted for every budget while I've been in the legislature. The vast majority of the budgets, I liked what was in them. There were some provisions I didn't care for, but I voted for the budget. And so every budget of the state of Maryland has my fingerprints on it because I voted for them. The governor wrote the budget, and of course we're amending it. So, you know, he has his fingerprints on it as well. So I don't agree that there's no accountability in that sense. But let me address again this whole issue of not pulling the trigger until you know you're going to hit the target. You know, I have seen many people insist to House and Senate chairs, you know, just pass this bill, and if it fails in the other chamber, that the onus will be on them. And I've seen concepts get stalled for. I've been in the legislature for 28 years now. I've seen concepts stall for 10, 15 years because it lost in the Senate or it lost in the House, and nobody believed it was going to pass. You know what? I'm going to have to ask you to take me on faith in this. I mean, it's just the way. It's my observation of the way legislation works. If a bill fails in a chamber, then, you know, people give up on the concept. On the other hand, when you line the votes up beforehand, I mean, ideally, we have the votes counted before we go to the floor. Not ideally, that's what we do.
All right, we have time for one more question for Delegate Barbet.
Hi, Kathy Carollo. Question, you were talking about the environmental impact statement, correct?
Yes.
And that they have to pick their choice before they do that.
I believe so. I will have to double check, but I believe so.
So aren't they going to pick what they want, which is likely to be for us the most onerous one that we can accept, like on 4 lanes everywhere? How do we influence what they pick before they do this statement?
Well, to be fair, we can't, okay? But what we can do is we can slow the process down so that we have enough time to pass a law that gives the legislature more of a say in how this is going to happen. Because right now we don't have as much of a say. You know, because the law was written given our experience with governors prior to this governor.
But once the environmental impact statement's done, they can go forward.
Yeah, sure, but nobody expects that to happen very quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, well, you're right. You're absolutely correct. But this is... No, don't apologize for interrupting. You're absolutely correct. That's an important distinction to make. But these environmental impacts studies are very involved and very time-consuming. You just can't write it on the back of a napkin, or you can't throw it together in 1 or 2 months. And so that's just the nature of the beast. And as I said to somebody back there, this is a federal law and process. It's not something that can be hurried up by a governor of the state.
Thank you very much, Delegate Barbe.
Okay, thank you.
Stick around afterward in case there's other people who want to ask you questions.
I can be here until 5 o'clock. I can be here until 5 o'clock, but believe it or not, during the legislature, I have to do my icky day job as an accountant on the weekends, so that bank statement is not going to balance itself.
So I made some notes for myself. Listening to the conversation. Let's see, pick this up. Okay. So Kumar pointed to one musical philosopher, I'll point to my other favorite musical philosopher, Bruce Springsteen. No retreat, no surrender. Sometimes that works. And sometimes it's the Alamo. There are two possible outcomes to any path you choose. So I've talked a little bit about what we've been trying to do. I was elected November. I spoke in early December at a breakfast, and I told the governor that if he was really serious about anything, he'd deal with the American Legion Bridge first, because all problems start there, and you don't know what to do on the backstream of a backup until you deal at your major congestion points. And I'll say that it was true with O'Malley. They were doing all their projects starting on upper 270, working south. And I'm thinking, all you're going to do is speed people to the back of this massive congestion, start where it begins, and then see what happens to the flows, and then go to your next choke point. What happened was he actually went back and talked to his transportation people, and a couple of weeks ago announced they're starting at the American Legion Bridge. So I feel like I got some victory out of that, a small one, but I think an important one. And it's good that Virginia, because they're bringing more lanes to the bridge, we better do something with the other side of the bridge. And so I'm optimistic that it'll at least start there. Somebody asked the question about why is there some trepidation, and there's trepidation inside our delegation, I know. And I feel part of it is, folks in the farther up county, when you get up around Clarksburg, feel a sense of having been stranded, and they deal with sometimes the worst of all this. And so we've tried, when I was on the council, we suggested to the O'Malley administration they do the 2 reversible lanes on I-270. I met with the governor in December, and this is what I talked about. I said, if you're going to do something, do the reversible lanes on 270. I said, if you don't want to do that, start by taking the inside service lane, which a lot of roads don't have, turn the inside service lane into the HOV lane, and instantly get an additional lane on I-270 and see what adding a lane tomorrow does to I-270. And I was told that wasn't splashy enough, not by him, but by somebody else, that there's no ribbon cutting of repainting a line. I wrote a letter to the State Highway Administration back during the campaign. I didn't publicize it because it just sounds like political stuff when you do that in a political campaign. But I asked them to look at a combination of taking the inside service lane and restriping I-270. And if you notice at the bottom of I-270 where the spur goes on to I-270, they did restripe. And they discovered they could pick up a lane. And I think there's a possibility that you can pick up a lane through restriping and using the inside service lane. You get 2 lanes. You don't have to do the reversibles. You get 2 in each direction, and you don't widen widen anything. If you widen, you have to take out every bridge over I-270 and the Beltway. And it is absolutely insane that on the Beltway you're dealing with a railway bridge and you're dealing with the metro bridge. And this is not something you take out and put back into service tomorrow. So you're talking about probably a year of delay to either metro or to the rail. And that's just unfathomable. That's a rail corridor, 4-inch freight corridor. So I don't picture that happening. Somebody asked, is there a solution, on I-270, a transit solution? To me, the most obvious transit solution is the third track on the MARC rail and running MARC, which was proposed and which O'Malley had suggested could be done in the 2030s. I think it should be accelerated, but you could run a third track on MARC rail and get bidirectional service. You could do that and get out to Western Maryland and West Virginia. And the advantage of doing that, obviously, is you're going to take a ton of vehicles off of I-270, but to do that, you really need two tracks because the service has to be in both directions, and you can't run both directions on freight rail running right at each other. The stopping times and some of the other problems that are involved are too complicated. So I do think there are solutions on the I-270 world that don't involve doing totally insane stuff. And on the Beltway, there really is not much they can do. And I grew up on the Beltway. My backyard of my house was 23 feet from the service lane of the Beltway before they expanded the Beltway. And my father was one of the first people who organized the neighbors to fight for the Beltway walls, because when I grew up, when I started, there was only a fence behind the house. You had all the noise and all the problems and the wall. So I'm all too familiar what it's like to be next to the Beltway. And as an asthmatic kid, I did note that when I moved away from my parents' house, my health changed. And I never put it together until I got older, when I realized my asthma attacks basically stopped when I wasn't living next to the Beltway. Coincidence? Maybe the being in the constant bath of pollution over there had an effect, but that was a real change. I've been working constantly. I met with the governor, I met with his staff, and I'm trying to propose alternatives, because we talk about alternatives to Beltway, congestion and I-270. So what we've talked about is looking at the reversibles. We're proposing a study of 355 from Clarksburg down to Montgomery Village Avenue, turning into 5 lanes the entire length, 3 lanes southbound in the morning, 3 lanes northbound in the evening. Get rid of the place where it goes down to 2 lanes, which creates an enormous bottleneck either getting out of or into Clarksburg. What genius left that undone when they built Clarksburg, I don't know, but we're trying to address it. And so that's sort of where I'm trying to figure out what solutions I can throw at them. I want to say one more thing, and I've told the governor this, and I've told the staff this. You can speed people around the Beltway all you want, they can't get off. And so the queues of cars getting off at Georgia, Connecticut, and Wisconsin, it doesn't matter how many exit lanes they've added to any of those exits, their backup is unchanged. So all you're going to do is speed people to the back of a line. And when that line gets longer, it actually spills back into a travel lane. Because in order for those lines not to affect the main travel, you have to be off to the side. So if he pushes those lines back any farther, he's got a double problem. He's going to have to add a lane for vehicles traveling. He's going to have to add a lane for the backup of cars that can't get off and onto the main roads. So they really need to think about this. I was hoping that the political stuff was over in November, having made a big splash and said, I'm going to do something bold, that he would then say, okay, I've said that. Now reality says I can't do that, and back to work. I want to work with them. We're trying to come up with concrete traffic-based, ground-based solutions to say, guys, there's another way to deal with this.
Thank you. See if we have a couple of questions for County Executive Eldridge. I saw, okay, go, right there.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Crane, and I live in College Square. You brought up a great point when you talked about restriping 270 it reminded me, when they removed the paint, it caused a bunch of erosion in the road surface, and they patched it, and then the patches came up, and now there's huge potholes. Now the same thing has happened on the express lanes headed south. What are we going to do about that? These potholes are dangerous. Can we get those fixed? Can we
They're
fast track that?
going to have to do a resurfacing job. I see what you're talking about every day. I don't understand how paint led to the pothole.
No, it's not that. It's the wireless or not at the top of the road. Anyway, go ahead and
Check. Let's try it.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, so my name is Jim Hatcher, and I live here on Woodley Drive. I also run an engineering firm called Human Circuit, which faces 270. I have a sprawling view of 270 from my office. My company's not as popular or known as Jason's. We don't make Italian ice, but we can solve this feedback problem. So, expanding 270 will destroy my neighborhood and destroy my business. And I'm frustrated at the apathy that I've encountered from my delegates. Back in November, I addressed the whole body delegation, and it was interesting to me that any 270 issues were saved till the end. We waited, we talked, and I left there disappointed, this feeling of apathy, sort of like in this idea that my delegates don't have any say over 270 and the expansion of 270. As an engineer, I think expanding 270 is ill-conceived. We can't simply pave a way out of congestion. So, I have a question for you. Yeah, I have a question for you. Will you endorse HB 102 and HB 663?
I've supported all the bills that are up there. I believe in a multi-pronged approach to this.
So you're on the record as supporting that right now, okay? If that's the case, what can you do to get the county council to endorse those bills?
I was kind of baffled. I mean, I think one of the council members talked about negotiating leverage. I don't think we've got much leverage. I think that we should support this legislation. I've also talked to some of the delegates who've also been tepid farther north of here. I mean, Kumar and folks around here, I think, get it. I think some of the folks who are getting pounded by the constituents farther north, I've tried to remind them that there are solutions that don't require them to do this. They don't necessarily believe that, and they're dealing with the constituency, which is really, really angry. I'm not apologizing, and I'm not changing what I think is right, but I'm trying to work with folks to understand that you can support traffic relief for the county without supporting this stupid project.
Thanks very much. Ladies and move on. Thank you. Can you hang around for a bit so other folks can ask you questions? Terrific. Here. Thank you.
Well, thank you and good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me. And the one person who didn't get applause is Pete. Do you think he deserves a little bit of I don't know that I'm going to need 5 minutes. I am absolutely opposed to 270 being widened and the Beltway, though that's not part of my district, and the Beltway beyond the footprint of it today. I cannot be clearer. I support the two bills that were being suggested. I think Kumar, I've known Kumar for many, many years, and I know that he certainly understands the political process, and I believe that Kumar knows, first of all, he's heard us loud and clear, and I believe Kumar knows the best way to try to get it through the state of Maryland. But I want to be very clear, I do not believe 270 should be widened, and as I say, for 495, beyond the footprint of today. And I got to tell you start talking history, I remember when 270 was called 70 and 70S, and the Washingtonian was there right in the middle of the golf course. So this has been a problem for many, many years. We have not solved it the way that it should be solved. I think we need to look at mass transit and beyond. My county executive, he and I served together on the county council, and I can tell you he's got some very, very good ideas. I always say that he and I don't always agree on every topic, and that's when he's wrong. But But as you can tell, he and I are buddies, so I'm allowed to say that to him. But I believe that we need to continue to do just what we're doing today, because candidly, you all have been treated right. You really have. You've not been allowed to figure out what you're going to do with your homes, whether you should fix up the front door or put in a new bathroom or fix up your kitchens. You can't make the investment in your homes the way that you want to, because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, although it looks like it's going to be next year, what'll happen for 2020. I think that and I can tell you and you're going to hear from my colleague Gabe Albernaz, and he's a new council member, but I believe he's going to be exactly or very similar to what I'm saying. I believe that the county council understands what we are doing, or what is being suggested for 270 and 495 is just plain wrong. I came in under budget. Thank you very much.
We have time for probably 2 questions for one hand.
Hi, my name is Mauricia Lazo. I live just down the road here. This is environmental. This is, we've all got reasons here for why we're upset about our properties, our communities, and if anyone that lives in this neighborhood knows, we feel threatened right now between a fire in our daycare, the school district having done redistricting on us, we've got this, we're feeling very threatened. But this is environmental. This impacts people well beyond this neighborhood, all our neighborhoods, and impact a lot of people in this county. So what can we do that we're not already doing to get the people that are not yet living in these neighborhoods, that would one day love to live in these neighborhoods, get them riled up? Because I cannot believe that with the population that we have in Montgomery County, that we could not have uproar across a lot of different people around just the environmental impact.
Well, and I thank you I think candidly that you have to just do, the expression, everybody else went to quote a song. I don't know a song to quote, I'm sorry. But I think we just have to redouble our efforts, and it's going to be tough because there's been a lot of efforts that have really continued on. I mean, I think that we need to make certain that everybody hears their concerns. But to Kumar's point, if this were Essex, you were in the Essex Bank, if this were Essex in Baltimore County, people in Montgomery County wouldn't necessarily care as much about what's going on there. So we have to make certain that Montgomery County stays strong, stays together, and that we can convince our friends in other places that they need to do the right thing by us, and we will certainly remember that and hopefully help them when they need the right thing done. But this is not an easy process. It certainly is not a pretty process, but it's a process that we need to go through, and it's a process that we're going to work through. And I can tell you, from the county side, the county council side, I sincerely believe that you will have a united front that will continue to make certain that we're going to get the best that we can get, but it shouldn't be anything beyond the footprint of what it is today.
Thank you, Olivia Bartlett. I actually live in Wildwood Hills, which is off Democracy, near where I-270 Spur and the Beltway come together. So I'm glad you talk about not widening beyond the footprint, but it's fairly widely known, I think, that Hogan is considering aerial lanes. So it might be, yes, you're looking at a model from Texas that has aerial lanes above the roadway. So even something that stays within the footprint, but is 40 feet in the air, is really going to be terrible. The air pollution is actually going to spread farther, air pollution, noise pollution. So be very careful when you say you oppose anything that's not going to widen. They're trying to make it seem like we're not going to widen.
I'm opposed to anything that would widen it or make it higher. And if anybody else knows about a tunneling and you're concerned, let me know.
Yes, I know, but we're going to have to keep moving on. Can you?
And I'll be here till 5 as well. I don't want Kumar to get ahead of me. I'll be here till 5 as well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I was just support of SB 442. So somehow they were reached and decided to show care. So that's good. All right. Councilmember Alvarez, why don't you please join us up here?
I am going to borrow this on Monday morning when I have to wake up my kids for school. Especially given daylight savings, Monday's going to probably be a little bumpy. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gabe Alvarez, one of your three of the four newly elected at-large members of the County Council. For just a little bit of context, I was born and raised here in Montgomery County and lived in Gaithersburg until I was 12 years old. And I remember picking up my dad from the old Amtrak MARC station, and on 2 separate occasions, he fell asleep and ended up in Cumberland, New York, and then had to come back. So I'm quite familiar and have seen, as Councilmember Katz has seen, the evolution of 270 and all that comes with it. And I don't have a great deal to add to what's already been said, other than to affirm, as Councilmember Katz said, that this council is fully committed to making sure that the governor and his Department of Transportation understands we are not in favor of the widening of the Beltway or 270. We've expressed a concern about the transparency and the process that has been followed to date, or the lack thereof, or the comments that clearly appear to be falling on deaf ears. But I do want to mention a couple of things. We can't just look at this in a vacuum, because economic development and getting people out of their cars in the first place is a baseline issue that we as a council have to focus on, and as a state have to focus on as well. There is room for economic development opportunities in Shady Grove and Gaithersburg and in Clarksburg, so that those folks don't have to get in their cars in the first place to travel up and down 270. I have a number of friends who have recently moved out of Montgomery County and into Urbana, but still work in DC because of the high cost of living here. And so there are a number of ancillary issues that have to be addressed if we're ever going to holistically address the transportation needs of our county. And I did want to stress just a couple of things. The council is pushing hard to make sure, and the county executive is as well, that mass transit is even part of the conversation, because it doesn't appear to be at this moment. And Kumar mentioned one of the options that I think should be taken seriously, and that is monorail. I received an incredible presentation about 3 weeks ago from a gentleman who has taken it upon himself to actively pursue this particular model. And I had just come back from Disney World, and so monorail had that particular context. And so when I saw the meeting on my calendar, I said, what's this all about? I was blown away by that presentation and the fact that a number of Asian countries have adapted monorail to address their issues because it is environmentally friendly, it is quiet, and it does move a large amount of people with great efficiency. And so there have to be reasonable solutions that we explore collectively, and it has to be hands on deck. I also very much appreciated what Councilmember Elridge said with regards to addressing 355. County Executive Elridge, sorry, it's been a long day. County Executive Elridge said about addressing 355 and a lot of the other ancillary roads, because as you all know better than anyone, people now rely more on 270 than they should have to just for local transit, because you don't have the ability to zigzag among communities in this part of the county all the way up through Frederick. I will also like to state emphatically that whatever mass transit options we look at have to go all the way to Frederick and not just stop right at the Montgomery County-Frederick line, because I think that will be important too. So, 50 seconds, I'm doing all right here.
You're looking at that.
That's right, that's right. So I just want to also acknowledge all of you. This is my first time in elected office, and critical mass is what really gets things done. I'm blown away by the level of organization and the level of commitment in this community. I live in Kensington, and my neighborhood, like yours, would be decimated by the widening of 495. And so I know how personal and how real and how anxious you feel. And this has to be an all hands on deck situation. We have a problem on 270 and 495. There's no denying that. But we can't look at short-sighted solutions like this that are difficult to argue even on the merits, because the minute we widen these lanes, there will simply be more cars. Thank you.
Time for a couple questions for Councilmember Alvarado.
Thank you. My name is Sean McCluskey. I live in Regent Square, and I work across 270 for WestEd. I particularly do transportation research, and I've heard alternatives kicked around here, and I'd be a little careful hitching. I fully support transit, but I'd be a little careful hitching everything to transit, because transit numbers across the board are down, and everybody knows, like, they'll know that. But what seems to be missing here is, where's the role of technology? It's 2019. A couple years ago, I saw a presentation in San Francisco. They had too much ridership. They needed a new tunnel under the Bay Bridge, or under the Bay but it would be billions of dollars, 50 years to build. So instead, they created an app that gamified. If people switch their commute a little bit here and there, they get pennies to their smart card. And people did it. It worked. It's fine. In University of Maryland, there's a professor there, Lei Zhang, who started the Maryland Transportation Institute, which is one of the premier ones in the world now. And he's using big data sources and all this, and he believes he can fix congestion with smartphone apps, and he's doing it. You allow him to look at your data. He knows where you're going. He helps, and then the app gives you information about how to do it better. So, and MDOT's aware of what's going on there, and as a part of this. So, I just feel like when all this is going on, there are simple solutions to this stuff that I'm just not hearing, and it's wild that technology is being left out.
Yeah, I'll give you a specific example. Thank you, John, for that comment. I share that same frustration and concern, because I'm not seeing enough of it either. So just our traffic lights. Take our traffic lights as an example. They are pre-programmed to go along with traffic patterns currently, but don't take into account things like accidents or massive road projects. And so they should be digitized, but they're not currently. And so there are lots of low-hanging fruit elements. Also, the state legislature right now has a bill that's been introduced by my colleague and friend Al Carr. It's a thing called Block the Box. In a number of urban districts, when you know that you are not going to make it through an intersection, but the light is green, but you go through anyways just to inch your way through, but then cause a big traffic jam going the other way, that is now proposed for being illegal. Which I think will have an impact on 355, because there are a number of intersections in which that occurs quite frequently. And so there are common sense solutions from both an innovation standpoint, but also a local bill standpoint that I think will make a difference.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Alvarado. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Mark Brochet, the council member, and in Rockville we represent the whole city. And Councilmember Virginia Onley and I. My song is "You Gotta Have Heart." Now, which musical did that come from? And the Yankees. I thought so. And Virginia Onley and I went to the first Montgomery County road show in Clarksburg High School, and we were disheartened because there are so few people there. After that, I took it upon myself, and I sent approximately 300 letters to people that lived right up against 270 or 495, trying to get more people at the second road show, which was located in southern Montgomery County, but nowhere near transit, and they didn't have enough parking. More people showed up. So why is my song "You Gotta Have Heart"? It's because the reason that this community came together, remember that mailing party we had? Okay, I asked people to bring stamps. We mailed to 5,000 homes. We have 889 extra stamps. And you gotta have heart, because this is gonna be a slog. You've heard the legislative story. You've heard that you're county council, your state legislature, reps are for you. Your city of Rockville is for you. And I have to admit, I have to say that Mayor Newton and Councilmember Feinberg are traveling. That's why they're not here. Otherwise, they would be here speaking. They're for you. We have sent several letters from the council to the state. But the reason I wanted comments was because you magnify those letters. If all they get are letters from the mayor and council, they're going to ignore them. If they get those letters and there's 5,000 to 10,000 comments from Rockville, that magnifies our voice. And I can't say how much you have to be part of it. And you have to get your friends and your relatives that live in the city and state to be part of that. We can't, all these letters we send, all the meetings we may have with the state at the state level don't mean anything unless you're out there, and that's why my song is gotta have heart. And this is gonna take several years. Kumar can stall for a year and perhaps get some bills passed, but you gotta be out there. You gotta be attending the road shows. You gotta make those road shows where people have to walk a mile to get to them. You have to jam those parking lots. You have to make the comments. You have to knock on the doors and get everybody else to make the comments. You have to flood it so badly that they can't ignore it. Because at the city level, we can only do so much. But when you magnify 2,200 comments, that was great. We need 20,000 next time. So I give these to Pete. 889 extra stamps. So anyway, that's where we come from. Mayor and council adamantly against expanding the footprint. I'm going to take on the elevated lanes too. We'll add that. Anyway, that's it. That's it for me.
Thank you. I also want to thank you because it was your outreach that got me aware of what was going on. I'd sort of vaguely heard about, and I thought, I'll be years. We were sitting right over there next to Sally 8-9 months ago when we were first here. So.
Well, and I got to say, I was at Sally's house with Richard Stoltz, and we saw that the deadline for comments was just 2 weeks. We made a plan on the spot, and that's why we ended up with several hundred people here at that mailing party. So thank you, Sally.
It's a good plan.
I don't want to throw water on the enthusiasm that we're trying to build up here. But is there any way that Rockville, or the county council, or the county executive can honestly stop this project if the governor decides to proceed with it? I don't think there is.
I'm going to say, don't be so cynical. The power of the budget, whether city, county, or state, is huge. Eventually, there's got to be budget to do this. Well, I know there's public-private, but even if you just get in the way, there are mechanisms. But that's why I say you got to have heart. It's a slog. Come at it every day for the next 3 to 5 years. That's what's going to defeat it. And don't be so cynical. Cynicism kills.
Thank you. I would say, yes, there are ways that we can stop this, and it's going to be doing this, talking to neighbors, talking to each other, getting more people involved, staying in close touch with our city, county, and state elected officials, and keeping this going and cause as much trouble as we possibly can. We'll get to that more when we reach the wrap-up point, but there is. So great question for.
Hello. Yeah, sorry to be cynical. Everything we have heard so far today seems to indicate that we have only budgetary measures to stall the process as opposed to stopping the governor. I mean, he told us what we wanted to hear before the elections, got elected, and now he's changing his tune. I mean, so elections matter, and we should have been aware of that before. Having said that, I know we can mobilize the community. Is there a way to mobilize the corporate leaders in this area who always want to build their headquarters near a transit station. So is there a way to get them to put some pressure on the governor, maybe, to make him see some rational, make some rational decisions, going forward, instead of sticking to this stupid plan?
Your question?
Well, I think I would personally start the Chambers of Commerce. I'm a member of Rockville Chamber of Commerce. I think we need to explore that. I think the businesses have to be part of it, yes.
All right, one more and then we're going to move on.
My name is Kathleen Shannon, and I've had the pleasure of being a MARC rider in both directions. And it's always stunning to me, getting a train in Rockville, the number of people that pour out of the MARC trains to catch Metro at Rockville. So that conveys to me that MARC is not saturated yet. It has a public image problem. So I tell people, oh yes, I take MARC to Washington. They're like, what? What is MARC? It goes to Washington? Where else does it go? So I'm thinking if we could bolster MARC ridership with a public, service campaign and get more people to go, because many of the people coming south are actually headed to the district. So if we could get more of those people on MARC by increasing the frequency of the trains and expanding their schedule a little bit, I think we could take a good, swath at the people coming south on 270.
Well, I used to take MARC to DC, and I do have to point out its only stop in DC is at Union Station. And and a lot of those people coming out of the train at Rockville are getting onto the Rockville Metro.
But then they connect to wherever they need to go from Union Station.
Yeah, they
But to save driving, I mean, it's a stop. Because I would talk to some of my fellow passengers. Oh, I'm from West Virginia. I'm like, what? I'm from Frederick.
I know.
But I'm thinking if we could bolster the image of MARC, get more people onto the MARC trains, expand that capacity, expand the number of trains, same tracks.
Right, I agree. It's every 20 minutes, every 30 minutes. It doesn't go both directions at the same time. Yes, I agree with that. I want to address the previous gentleman who noticed that we're in stall mode at the moment. For example, with Kumar Barve's strategy, don't dismiss the power of a stall. He has to have time. If all he can do at this moment realistically is stall, that's what we have to do. But in the meantime, he's buying time. And that's when we can get the momentum legislatively to do what we need to do. So don't dismiss that we have to do a stall at the moment. That's what we have to do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think Councilmember Pichella pretty much mentioned everything. I just want to confirm that the mayor and council are committed to working with you and fighting this every step of the way. We did send the governor a letter last year that I'm sure most of you have seen, and we asked him to put his verbal commitment in writing, which he didn't. So now, fast forward, we're after the election, so things are different, but I believe we can fight this. Someone mentioned about us suing them. We'll check with the legal staff to see if that is an option, because if that's an option, we will. But on a personal note, and this is an anonymism, which is my opinion, well, we haven't talked about this as a governing body, but unfortunately, we've become a society that we don't want mass transit. It's everybody wants to be in their cars. If you look at the television, how many advertisements do you see for taking the Metro or taking the MARC? It's all about this car and that car and what the best sale is of the month. And I think if we could get going on mass transit, because that's not going to be an overnight fix, but I personally would take mass transit. And I think we need to push harder for that. I think we need to consider the environment, because everybody just kind of gets in their car. We don't think about the pollution, and thank you for getting the thumbs up back there. But we as elected officials need to really work on getting some mass transit going and getting people out of their cars.
Any questions?
collaborative effort going on with any governing body in DC on the mass transit? Because obviously a lot of people come around the Beltway to go into DC, and if they could take the metro to get to areas that are not DC or metro connected in DC, that may ease ridership. That's not going to solve every problem, but is there any communication at all with Virginia or DC to solve that?
Okay, well, is someone else want to answer? I don't know of any collaboration. I know the county has a BRT, bus rapid transit plan. I know Gaithersburg has one. We in Rockville have not nailed down what we want as far as it going through Rockville. So that's something we really do need to work on.
So Rockville needs to nail it down, but I served on the Transportation Planning Board at COG, got for council governments for 12 years. And a couple of years ago we did a study because we have talked that we have this list that we call the Constrained Long Range Plan that everybody knew we were never going to build. And so we tell everybody this is what the future is going to look like. Actually, that's not what it's going to look like because there's no money for it. And so we decided we would look at and study 10 things that might actually be game changers that would be worth doing regionally. And the top two things, one was policy changes that actually drove people toward transit and away from driving. And the second was everybody doing the BRT thing because you need more interconnectivity, which you can get from bus rapid transit. And so the reason that I put forward the plan of Montgomery County is the red lines just go north and south, and it's two ends of the same line. There's no inter-county connectivity. And so we were looking at how do you provide connectivity within the county, and then how do you make connections, for example, into the district. The district's talked about taking out the curb lane during rush hour possibly for buses. That would give us an excuse in Montgomery County to take out the curb line in Wisconsin Avenue for buses. Could you imagine how many people we could stream without cars in the curb lane to the northwest side of the district, place where the metro doesn't get to, and our ability to actually provide service if we can coordinate together. So what I hope comes out of that study is a bigger effort now to sit down and talk about if one person builds this and somebody else builds that, how do we link them up so they just don't become walls, but I can go from one system to another system. But it's a great idea. It's what we're going to have to do.
Thank you. All right, we've got time for one more question.
So I think it's also a good time to push our legislators to do some audience segmentation to understand the future of how people want to get around. Because there's been a lot of data on millennials, Gen Xers, that there's a preference to move towards mass transit. And so we need to mobilize those communities to do something more. But I also think we need to get our local leaders to understand the future of their constituents and their needs and desires. The second thing I wanted to ask, and I don't know if anyone has an answer for this, but for P3, is there any way we can do any modification to it to ensure that the potential private sector companies would be U.S. companies versus foreign? There have been some localities and even other countries that have used foreign investment where they see that the projects are degrading after the lifespan of the partnership. So I think that's an important thing for us to consider as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, any change to the P3 law would have to be another law or a modification of the existing law. As to America only, I think that would violate our trade agreements to be, if we were, you know what, I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to find out.
The federal government does have some things where they require.
Okay, you know what, I shouldn't comment. I clearly don't know what I'm talking about.
The first comment, just to underscore your point, there has been a precipitous decline in the amount of 16-year-olds seeking learner's permits through the state of Maryland, a significant decline. So you're absolutely right about that. We need to think about the future and some of the other modules of transportation.
Well, what do people in Gaithersburg and Germantown and Frederick do to get to the end of the red line? I mean, we have lots of options here. I can drive and get on the metro.
So,
Up county, they drive.
it's an excellent
They
question.
drive.
And we're actually scheduled to vacate this room at 5, so we do need to bring things to an end, because that's, 30 seconds from now. I want to recognize Jennifer Hosey for joining us today as well. And then, very quick wrap-up thing. So, thank you very much to all of the officials for the excellent conversation. Thank you very much to all of you. Clearly a fascinating topic that everyone wanted to stick with. So, a couple of next steps, and we will of course be in contact. Urge your state senators to support the House Appropriations bill that has the amendment that Delegate Barbe talked about. MDOT is hosting another round of presentations on the screened alternatives, and we need everybody to turn out for those. The one that's closest to this location will be at Wooten High School on April 25th. On the fact sheet that you got when you came in, somewhere on there is the web address where you'll find the rest of those events listed. We'll also be in touch with you about that. And then Secretary Ron will be addressing the County Council on March 18th, I was told.
You know my schedule better than I do.
Okay, great. And so I think that that's only 9 days away, but I think that if that is something that people can go to, I know it's a daytime thing, but for Secretary Ron to be confronted with people who are against this plan would be extremely important. So if you're able to go to the County Council on the 18th, on the 19th, excuse me, I beg your pardon. Thank you. I wasn't told the time yet. We will get an email out once we find the time and let everybody know. But thank you all again very much, and that concludes today's program. Thank you.